Good evening, I'm Pia Ontiveros. This is News.PH, but it's not politics as usual. This is the tragedy of our times, that every time the rains come, so does the realization that we keep putting off what we should have done decades, if not ages ago. What makes it even more tragic is that we can actually just replay interviews with architects, engineers, scientists, hydrologists, because they say, I've already said this before, which is what I'm sure my guest tonight will say. A well-known architect, a respected urban planner, a man passionate about his country, about urbanism, and yes, even politics, governance, sociology, history, civic-mindedness. Architect Paolo Alcazaran. Thank you. I was about to say, sir. Thank you, Paolo, for being with us tonight.
Good evening, Pia.
Good evening.
It feels like I feel like Bill Murray in that movie Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Groundhog Days. You wake up and it's the same thing over, and it's you again in front of me and asking me
Yes, and
questions.
it's you again in front of me, and I wanted to say thank you for essentially agreeing to just do a repeat of the interview a year ago.
No problem, I can do it in my sleep.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
That's how much of a broken record it is.
Okay. Well, let's begin with this. If we study, and this is what you said also last year, and this is what you said in your column a few days ago in the Philippine Star. If we study what happened 200 years ago, nothing has changed, right?
Well, what has changed is that Metro Manila has become 5 times larger than it was half a century ago, 10 times larger than it was a century ago. That's what's changed. So the thing is, the problem just keeps on getting bigger and bigger, but we find no solutions, or whatever solutions we have, we just keep on trying to catch up on to address them.
But why? What is it about us that makes us do this?
Well, it's because the realities of our cities, or our biggest city, which metropolis, which is Metro Manila, has just escaped in terms of how big physically it is and how much of a increase in population it's had in the last 100 years. So it's always catching up rather than planning for something in the future and making sure the infrastructure is there to address all of our needs. That's as simple as I can put it, because that essentially is what urban or city planning is, addressing the needs of the future.
Urban planning is a mess, no? Is that a fair enough statement?
Well, there is no urban planning essentially in Metro Manila, because you have no control over the factors that affect physical planning in the metropolis. The population size, the infrastructure, the transportation, the drainage, and basic services just escape being contained. And essentially, since we are a metropolis with 16 or 17 different kingdoms, and nobody talks to each other or coordinates, nothing can ever get done. Okay.
And that was an interesting thing that you said a year ago, and I think you've said that in the past also, no? 17 different kingdoms, when in the past we used to have this Metro Manila Authority, Metro Manila Commission, this martial law era structure that could have been useful.
Yes, in fact, we're the last remaining metropolis of our size in Asia that is not governed as a unified body or as a single governance. So you have Metro Tokyo, you have Metro Jakarta, even is a big metropolis. Singapore is essentially one big city. Kuala Lumpur is the same. So we are governing Metro Manila as it was 200 years ago. The political boundaries of all of our towns and cities, are now the 16 cities in one town in Metro Manila, are boundaries set 2-3 centuries ago, when the realities was it was mostly open, and the only urbanized area was the center, which is Manila.
Okay, and now this time around, we still haven't realized that. It's like we're afraid to have another Metro Manila Commission, another Metro Manila Authority?
Yes, we threw out the baby with the bathwater after the People Power Revolution and everything that was before that. Not everything was evil, or not everything was bad, and so governance with Metro governance is actually a good thing.
Is there a way to do massive rebuild, or more correctly, a massive planning or replanning or whatever it is? I mean,
yes,
can we still save ourselves? I mean,
yes, we could, and we tried before. Over the last century, I've counted 12 different master plans, from the 1905 Daniel Burnham plan all the way to the 3 before the war, and the 6 during the post-war and in the 50s, and the few in the 70s under the Metro Manila Authority at the time. So at each point, we tried to address the needs of the city with framework that could have saved us. But at each point, fate conspired to make sure that nothing was built or nothing was pushed through. So during the American period, it was the change in government policy and towards Commonwealth, and of course there's the war. After the war, we had problems, and going into the martial law era, there were problems of that era. So at each point, the population and the increase, because it's a free market, the city and the cities increased in size and extent. So now we're 12 million or 15 million if you really count the outlying areas, in a city size that's 10 times larger than what it was at the start.
Okay, so we can't, I mean, you know, with, like you said, no, ang daming master plan. I mean, there were, like, just last year, 2012, master plan, World Bank funded. And then there was that 1970s master plan by June Palafox.
Well,
is it as simple as, okay, let's get this master plan and implement it now?
No, you can't. No. You can't. Even though the plans of the past, we should not romanticize even the Burnham plan, because they cannot ever be brought back. The conditions of within which these plans were made are all changed. So we have to find a way to jump in front of the problems and create a plan that addresses the current problems plus the needs of the future. And this is where you need to have certain things,
like
conditionalities, which is first and foremost is the governance structure. A lot of our problems are physical, but the problems of implementing any solutions need a metro governance. The floodwaters will not respect the boundaries between Marikina and Pasig or San Juan.
Yeah, right. They don't stop at
Marikina. Stop at the boundaries.
They go into Quezon City.
Yes, water flows seeks the lowest level, and that's why it floods. Well, of course, there are other reasons why we flood. We didn't build that Parañaque spillway, which was the second element, a necessary element in the
early 70s master plan.
The early 70s, the thought was to drain everything into, or a lot of the floodwaters into Laguna de Bai, and from that point, that's only a retention area to drain out into the sea. So they built the Mangahan spillway, but failed to build the Parañaque spillway. And today, Parañaque is all fully urbanized. It would take trillions and trillions of pesos to try and build it if you could ever do that.
Okay, so what are you telling us, that there is no solution?
Well, there's a radical solution if you want to look at that specific problem of finding an outlet for that 1970s corrective, which is the Parañaque spillway. The only other possible alignment of a large waterway would be the Manila International Airport, because if you look at the map, it's about 8 to 9 kilometers. It's about the same width as Parañaque, but you can't build in Parañaque anymore. If the airport gets moved, as a lot of people believe it will be moved, then you can build a spillway using the right-of-way of the airport, which is owned by the government.
Okay.
And there's only a very small section through Taguig, but that's a much smaller problem than
Taguig always floods.
Well, that's it. Well, it floods because there is no outlet for the water that goes into it. But you have to really think of out-of-the-box solutions. We cannot get fixed into solutions of the past. It must be a totally new paradigm.
When you say you, who's the you there?
Well, us.
Us.
Yes.
But then, di ba knee-jerk reaction ng gobyerno? Oh, let's set up this task force. Let's set up this commission. Let's put up an interagency committee. Mga ganun. And then they get bogged down in all these bureaucracy,
Well,
red tape,
it's
rules,
layers.
etc.?
It's really layers of bureaucracy, and the first layer is, of course, the LGUs, the 16 cities and one town. And then you have the Metro Manila Development Authority, which today is essentially responsible only for traffic and garbage. And then you have the national, the layers of national agencies, DPWH, the land transportation, and everybody else. So you have 3 layers of governance to sift through to try and get anything done. And since Metro Manila, going back to the original problem, is 16 cities and one town, then, and everyone has been decentralized, it's very hard to find a central solution, which is what you need for all of the big problems like flooding, crime, pollution.
Today in Malacanang, Secretary Babe Singson of the DPWH said, and I quote, we had wanted to do this, meaning move the informal settlers out of the waterways. We had wanted to do this, pero tatapatin ko na kayo, maraming nakiusap. Wag naman sana bago mag-eleksyon. Eh ngayon, ang ibuelta na namin sa amin, magkakaroon naman ng barangay election. Hindi na kami papayag. Tapos medyo may konti siyang cambio. No? He said, and again I quote, siguro you're overreacting to that anecdote dahil na-follow up siya ng Malacanang reporters na pinigil. Hindi naman pinigil. Tuloy-tuloy naman, as I said. And then somebody asked, sino ba nilapitan? Hindi ako. Sino? Anecdotes lang yon. And then he said, ang dami namang LGU involved dyan. Take your guess. What do you make of something like that?
Well, this is where the problems of flooding overlap with the political problems, the problems of urban housing. In a situation where government and society cannot provide for the basic need of shelter, then people find their own solutions, and that solution is informal settlements. That is a huge problem, and it's embedded in our political problem of fractured governance. So it conspires, the whole situation conspires for each LGU government to try and retain their informal settler population, because these are in many ways assured votes, or these are their captive votes. Now, again, a radical solution, and I have to state this possibility, is that if you have a metro governance and find some way in the Constitution to still ensure the right to vote, but the right to vote only for a metro governance, but not of the individual LGUs anymore, then you can people can still vote, formal or informal, for their leaders of government within a larger structure. And this is required. You must build affordable, low-cost housing and house the 3 or 4 million people within the metropolitan boundaries, and that's a huge problem, almost as difficult as to solve as the flooding problem.
Okay. Last year, and this is before we go to a break, last year when I interviewed you, that was August 2012, by that time, kasi you had posted on your Facebook page, all these very cute, funny illustrations, about possible solutions to all our, the entire myriad of problems. And I was wondering if this time around, here we go again, eto na naman tayo, Groundhog Day. Have you come up with new illustrations and new solutions?
Well, to tell you the truth, it's not funny anymore. And I don't think that it's any help to make light of the situation. I've always felt that we've crossed the tipping point, we passed the tipping point, and if we don't do anything immediately, as in yesterday, then problems will
When did we cross that tipping point?
It's obvious. If you're looking from the outside, yes.
Several years ago.
Between last year and this year, it's pretty obvious. We're like the frog in the slowly boiling kettle of water. Our problems are so bad, we don't know that we're already cooked. And so that's the danger of living in the metro, because we get so used to dealing with the problems. We're so adaptive as a people that we just take it and take it. But now, as you can see in the last few days, the city grinds to halt, the metropolis grinds to halt.
Wala pang habagat nun.
Wala pa.
Okay.
And of course, there's the earthquake we had.
Okay. We'll have to take a short break. News.PH will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching News.PH on the Solar News Channel. I'm Pio Ontiveros. My guest tonight, architect Paulo Alcazaran. He's at Pinoy Urbanist on Twitter, but you're more on Facebook.
Yes.
And that's where you were posting all those illustrations last year. But like you were saying before the break, it's not funny anymore.
It's really not funny. And having to sludge through traffic yesterday and today, it's not funny anymore. And I got tired of putting up all this caricatures and drawings. Although some of them are really practical solutions. Being a designer, my default is to draw something up as a solution.
Yeah.
But now I've taken the tack of being a bit more serious. And if I may draw the reason why we flood. This is Metro Manila, and the problem is a lot of our citizens are not map literate anymore. This is Laguna de Bay. This is Manila Bay. Manila is here. 100 years ago, Manila was only this area. And then every decade we would go further and further out until with about 1,000 square kilometers of highly urbanized area, all of which we fill with concrete, the roads, the parking lots, the buildings.
There's something about us, no?
Yes.
We like to fill up.
It's a horror vacui, fear of empty spaces, and also because it's urbanization without any control. And the effect of paving everything over is that the water that falls, and the water falls much stronger now because of climate change. There's nowhere for the water to go, and it goes straight to a drainage system that essentially is about 50 years old. And this is Metro Manila. This is the West Valley fault line. And all of the water that falls here in the Sierra Madres, which is almost completely deforested, they have nowhere to go but down. Because this is upland, this is lowland, and this is where the Mangahan spillway works. It brings it all to the Laguna de Bay, which then overflows, and there's nowhere for it to drain because the Parañaque spillway was never built. So you will have to wait for months, as they do now or last year, for the water to be slowly absorbed by the bottom of the lake, and for the rest of the area around Metro Manila to absorb the water, because we've covered it all up with concrete. So the solution is really, the only solution, it seems, is to find an outlet. You can mitigate some of it by dredging the lake and increasing the capacity, and also, as the DPWH is planning to do, putting retention basins to capture the water before it flows. But really, the problem is not just one. It must be a cocktail of solutions, one that really has to start up here, which is beyond even the governance of an integrated Metro Manila. It's regional. So try and get Bulacan and all the provinces up there to coordinate with a Metro Manila governance, and you have the fourth and fifth additional layer of governance you have to get through to try and solve the problem of this. So it's really complicated, and every year it gets more complicated because urbanization is spreading here, This is being reclaimed. So, and then these two areas, because of extraction of groundwater, is suffering subsidence. This area is a foot lower than it used to be. This area is 3 feet or a meter plus lower. That means the floods will stay longer. If you have a surge, the floods will reach up to about 20 kilometers inland. And so everywhere you look, it's the gates of hell.
Ay nako, okay.
So
God, it makes
they need a map like that in government.
So who's going to do all that? Like, well, yeah, okay, you said us. Okay. Us.
We all have to do it. We all have to realize that if we don't get together, we don't coordinate or have a single entity, a governance structure that makes it happen, and everyone toes the line. We will see each other every year, the two of us.
Next year na naman. Okay. In August 2012, in that interview last year, you said, and I quote, "My prediction is next month, this will all be forgotten." That's sad, but here we are 3 years from the last incident, meaning Ondoy. We're repeating essentially the same things. Last year also, at roughly the same
Yes.
time I interviewed you, I had interviewed Glenn Tabios, a
Yes.
hydrologist. And all we had to do was replay the report I did on that interview, and it was exactly
You could have
the
just
same.
replayed our interview.
No, wag. No, because it makes sense for you now to say na, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, it's not funny anymore.
We've crossed that tipping point,
Yes.
di ba?
Yes.
Nandun, lumampas na tayo sa threshold.
Yes, I can't make light of it. It's like Vice Gundam making. Oh, anyway, that's another story.
Wait, anyway, you also said, and I quote, "You don't listen to us unless a disaster happens and we get interviewed."
Yes.
You meaning like politicians? What?
Us meaning people in the physical design professions, the architects, landscape architects, the engineers, the planners, or the scientists in the natural sciences, and they all tell us that this is what we're doing wrong. We're abusing nature, and nature is getting back at us. So we must realize that our existence is in a physical reality, which is changing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say just climate change. It's man-made changes because of urbanization. So we really also have to look at how we build cities, the physical manifestations of our increasing population and our increasing economy. We have to find new paradigms for development, and it's something that cannot be brought to us from overseas. In fact, the scientists and planners and everyone else from the West are coming to Asia, and especially to the places like the Philippines, because our problems are so big and so complex. They have no solutions to our problems. It must be us. So what's lacking, again, if you're looking at it from the point of academia, is research and development into new ways to build Philippine cities, and especially the largest complex of cities, which is Metro Manila.
Yeah. And you also said that last year.
Yes,
exactly the same thing.
Although academia has reacted, and they are doing that, except that, of course, as you know, like my alma mater, UP, gets little support.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the subtext here, correct me if I'm wrong, urban planning is too delicate to be left in the hands of politicians,
but they're
developers.
the ones that shape our cities.
Yeah. Well, okay, let me rephrase. To be left just in their hands.
Yes.
Like you said, no, we need to engage.
We need to engage, and we need for everyone to get involved. In other cities and other countries, if you mention terms of planning like densities or floor area ratios or plot ratios or infrastructure, most ordinary citizens in those cities understand what they are. The media also helps to educate them. You will find in Philippine newspapers and in other media that there's a lack of illustrations and drawings to show physically what the changes bring about, how the physical problems affect us, but not so in, say, Malaysia or Singapore, where I lived for 12 years. You would have regular diagrams and patterns to explain to everyone what exactly the government was going to do or was doing, and what exactly the changes, like the haze that besets Singapore and Malaysia every few years. They show illustrations to make it very clear to people that these are the repercussions of abusing nature.
Your column in the Philippine Star entitled 10 Reasons Why It Floods in Manila, a few days going on. So I read through it, and I was thinking, oh my God, he said this, or he's been saying this, everybody's been saying this for so long. And
it's not just me, it's a lot of people who study cities, urbanists and planners, and 10 is just the major reasons, and it's much more complex than that. But these are the major reasons: the climate change, the lack of modern drainage system, the siltation, the informal settlers in these areas, but because they have no choice, the fractured governance, the lack of control in planning, where you build mixed-use complexes where the infrastructure or drainage is meant only for subdivisions. So we keep on piling one problem over another and hope that the problem gets pushed to the next LGU or the next adjoining area or the next river. We can't do that anymore because we're all interconnected. What flows from one city will flow to to the next, be it floods, crime, pollution. We're all connected, and we cannot isolate ourselves. The rich cannot enclave themselves anymore from the problems.
Well, it floods in,
yes.
in the subdivisions.
You can buy a penthouse in the 60th floor, but the air pollution will still reach you. You go down and the traffic is still there. You go down and the informal settler is just outside your perimeter wall. So there is no escape. We're all trapped here. Not just the gates of hell, it is hell for most of us.
Okay, okay. What is it that will push us to finally really do something, even if we are beyond that tipping point?
It's hard to say. Like I said, we're the frog slowly cooking, and before we all know it, we're all cooked and ready to be served. I hate to say it, but it will be a really bad disaster. I mean, the earthquake we had just a few hours ago was 5, and the projections of anything higher than 8. The scenarios have already been painted that the fatalities are 200,000 plus, and that's a very conservative estimate. And if you have the perfect storm or everything all together, it rains, liquefaction. There are reports that a new fault has been found crossing Manila. There is no escape for anyone. Of course, some of my friends on Facebook say then it's time to move.
Move where?
Move the whole city, move the whole capital.
City.
And there are
but
some
that's something also we've been talking about for years.
But it's difficult. We cannot do that. It's not practical. We have to find new paradigms, but we also have to live with realities. Metro Manila is the biggest generator of gross national product, although we only have less than 10% of the population. We're accountable for half of the wealth created. So you have to look at that and have to find realistic ways to mitigate problems and to find solution. And that is really something that can be done if we just talk to each other, if we just manage our resources so that we can address these problems and in a long-term outlook.
Okay, my one final question, brief answer, please. If tomorrow, halimbawa, pwedeng ikaw na lang ang magdesisyon kung anong mangyayari, kung anong gagawin, what is the first thing that you would do tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning?
Redraw the political boundaries of Metro Manila instead of 16 cities and 1 town. And this has already been done, not by me, but with other primaries before. There were proposals as early as in the 70s to cut, to divide Metro Manila into more rational divisions of about 6 or 7 and govern it as one entity. And that's the only way we can find a solution. The physical problems, there are so many planners, engineers, architects, landscape architects who can contribute to the solution. But unless you change governance, nothing will happen.
And of course, we have to talk about all those egos that have to go out with it. Thank you very much, Architect Paulo Alcazar, and thank you so much.
I hope I don't see you next year.
I think we will. I think we will. And thank you all for watching. I hope we can really think about and think very deeply about what Paulo Alcazar just told us, because we know there'll be another one of those great floods, those great disasters, and the Bayanihan spirit just won't be enough. Our solutions are more band-aid than long-term, more stopgap than well thought out, more rescue and relief than real rehabilitation and forward planning. I'm Pio Ontiveros. This is News.PH. See you again next Wednesday. Good night.
Other coordinates, nothing can ever get done.
Okay. And that was an interesting thing that you said a year ago, and I think you've said that in the past also, no?
Several
17 different kingdoms, when in the past we used to have this Metro Manila Authority, Metro Manila Commission, this martial law era structure that could have been useful.
Yes, in fact, we're the last remaining metropolis of our size in Asia that is not governed as a unified body or as a single governance. So you have Metro Tokyo, you have Metro Jakarta even is a big metropolis. Singapore is essentially one big city. Kuala Lumpur is the same. So we are governing Metro Manila as it was 200 years ago. The political boundaries of all of our towns and cities are now...
What makes it even more tragic is that we can actually just replay interviews with architects, engineers, scientists, hydrologists, because they say, I've already said this before, which is what I'm sure my guest tonight will say, a well-known architect, a respected urban planner, a man passionate about his country, about urbanism, and yes, even politics, governance, sociology, history, civic-mindedness. Architect Paolo Alcazaran. Thank you. I was about to say, sir. Thank you, Paolo, for being with us tonight.
Good evening, Pia.
Good evening.
It feels like, I feel like Bill Murray in that movie, Groundhog Day. Groundhog Days. You wake up and it's the same thing over, and it's you again in front of me and asking me
Yes, and
questions.
it's you again in front of me, and I wanted to say thank you for essentially agreeing to just do a repeat of the interview a year ago.
No problem, I can do it in my sleep.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
That's how much of a broken record it is.
Okay. Well, let's begin with this. No, Good evening, I'm Pia Ontiveros. This is News.PH, but it's not politics as usual. This is the tragedy of our times, that every time the rains come, so does the realization that we keep putting off what we should have done decades, if not ages ago. If we study, and this is what you said also last year, and this is what you said in your column a few days ago in the Philippine Star. No? If we study what happened 200 years ago, nothing has changed, right?
Well, what has changed is that Metro Manila has become 5 times larger than it was half a century ago, 10 times larger than it was a century ago. That's what's changed. So the thing is, the problem just keeps on getting bigger and bigger, but we find no solutions. Or whatever solutions we have, we just keep on trying to catch up on to address them.
But why? What is it about us that makes us do this?
Well, it's because the realities of our cities, or our biggest city, which metropolis, which is Metro Manila, has just escaped in terms of how big physically it is and how much of a increase in population it's had in the last 100 years. So it's always catching up rather than planning for something in the future and making sure the infrastructure is there to address all of our needs. That's as simple as I can put it, because that essentially is what urban or city planning is, addressing the needs of the future.
Urban planning is a mess, no? Is that a fair enough statement?
Well, there is no urban planning essentially in Metro Manila, because you have no control over the factors that affect physical planning in the metropolis. The population size, the infrastructure, the transportation, the drainage, and basic services just escape being contained. And essentially, since we are a metropolis with 16 or 17 different kingdoms, and nobody could talk to each